Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. On this episode of Barkeep Upkeep, I'm going to give some suggestions on how to incorporate silver-bordered cards into your Commander games. Now, silver-bordered cards are banned in Commander, but they were legal for 6 weeks with the release of Unstable in December of 2017. For some, this spelled the doom of the format, while others rejoiced. It created quite the schism within the community, to say the least. The Rules Committee did provide a ban list of some silver-bordered cards as well as some to be wary of lest it sour the experience. When brewing uncommanders, aka silver-bordered legendary creatures, I try and use that precedent in mind even though the Rules Committee has stated that they will never again unban them. So now, silver-bordered cards are a matter of Rule 0. Basically anything goes in the format as long as the people you're playing with are okay with it. There are actual format-specific rules and deck construction rules for when you're out in the real world, but if everyone at a game agrees with it, pretty much anything goes. That's Rule 0 in a nutshell. However, I can understand people not wanting to invest in cardboard they can't turn sideways. I can also understand the utter disdain people have against silver-bordered cards, even though not all of them are silly, ridiculous, or impossible to get a firm grasp on, much less those that essentially break the game. This video is my take on how you can implement some silver-bordered cards into your Commander games to spice up your brews all that more. Let's face it, there's a bunch of fun silver-bordered commanders to build around, like Lucilda Monster Masher, Dr. Julius Jumbo Morph, The Big Idea. There's quite a list. However, you can't go up to any table and play with them without express consent from said table. Some might just outright tell you no. This is where you can use the social contract to your benefit, and this is my first point on the subject. When people first sit down at a game, etiquette dictates people at least state the intended power level of the game in order to choose a deck. I'm going to play with a 5. Or I'm going to play a competitive Urza deck. A consensus is usually achieved and everyone's more or less at the same level. You might even mention the strategy more or less to help people understand the power level of your deck. This is Turtle Tribal, or I'm running Mass Land Destruction. The same could be applied to silver-bordered cards. Maybe Grusilda is the only silver-bordered card in your deck, and she's the commander, so she's easy to show. Hey, is it okay if I use Grusilda? She's the only silver-bordered card in the deck. That seems more likely to be accepted than mentioning you have a slew of silver-bordered cards in the deck that require players having eye-staring contests or arm wrestling matches. Don't get me wrong, lots of people like those sorts of interactions in their Magic games. What I'm talking about here is sitting down at any table and being able to play with your uncommander deck. Maybe the deck is Dr. Julius Jumbo Morph. Obviously, you're going to be running more silver-bordered cards because all augment and host creatures are silver-bordered. But if you say, hey, is it cool if I play this deck the only silver-bordered cards are the host and augment creatures, that's more likely to be accepted than just having a bunch of random silver-bordered cards that you might have to list out before the game. A good tip is to make the decision easy and swift for the table. If they have to analyze and listen to you list out which cards you have and why, they might just say no at the onset just to get it over with. Another tip to easing people into accepting the silver-bordered cards is to try and use those that are as close to black-bordered Magic as possible. There are already a bunch of chaotic and crazy Magic cards in black-bordered like Scrambleverse, Warp World, etc., so playing something like Blast from the Past seems basic and normal in comparison. So, in order to make it easier for players to accept your silver-bordered cards, stick to cards that don't require other players to do things they don't want to do, like play mini-games, eye-staring contests, holding their breath, etc., keep track of words they can't say or have to say, cards with fractions, whether fractional mana symbols, power toughness, damage, etc., cards with game warping effects like switching the order of a turn, eliminating rules, etc. One final tip is for those who have a commander cube or are in the process of building one, or even thinking about building one. Since you're constructing a cube, you can put in any card you like if it's within what you want to do. What makes it a commander cube is that after you draft, you construct a commander deck. So you can add whatever you want to it, conspiracies, banned cards, silver-bordered cards, test cards, etc. If your playgroup sees how fun playing with silver-bordered cards are in a limited environment, maybe they'll allow such hijinks in a constructed environment. Speaking of constructed environment, the rest of this episode is a special segment, sort of like a podcast between myself and the team in charge of EDH Silver, a website dedicated to Uncommander, an add-on format to Commander. This isn't a separate format, or sort of like a guide on adding silver-bordered cards to Commander. There is a philosophy to the allowed and disallowed cards, but for the purpose of the site is to try and bring some kind of formality to the inclusion of silver-bordered cards in Commander, to such a point where it makes games fun and takes out all of the potential headaches of just using any which silver-bordered card. So without further ado, here's the conversation. I'm Demented Kirby, and I'm joined here by the creators of the EDH Silver website.
Hey guys.
Hello, I'm Humps from Space.
And I'm Shadowland.
All right, guys,
And
welcome to the
together
tavern.
Sorry.
So yeah, thank you for having us here today. So what would you like to talk about?
Well, when I stumbled onto your website a couple of months ago, I think it was, I don't really remember, I was actually looking for a way to incorporate silver bordered cards into Commander, but in a more streamlined way. Because the rules committee, they did allow it for a couple of weeks when Unstable came out, but obviously they said, oh, we're never going to do this again, but more silver bordered products are coming out. So I wanted to see if other people were, getting their hands into this, and that's when I stumbled upon your website, which not only includes silver bordered cards, but other types of cards as well. So I was just wondering more or less if you guys can talk about how you conceived this idea of trying, to formalize these kinds of cards into a separate format.
Well,
To be honest,
yeah. Do you want to take this time, or shall I?
actually, I think you should take this, as you were the one who had the additional concept for the website.
Well, I mean, I guess the original concept was basically there's just so many cool silver bordered cards that don't need to be silver bordered. It makes me quite annoyed in a way, or it did when I first started. Just all these really interesting cards. I mean, the original one that I thought was the coolest was Staying Power, and actually that one does need to be banned for various reasons. But basically, there's just so many interesting little effects. Dice rolling, loads of coin flip cards that work way better with... they've actually started bringing those into the main game. Some of their latest stuff, like the playtest cards, loads of those are sort of prospective mechanics. One of them even got turned into a mechanic in Theros.
Yeah.
Well, the latest Theros, anyway.
Yeah, it's curious that you mentioned Staying Power, because I read somewhere, I think either on the Wizards website or Mark Rosewater's blog, that Staying Power, he actually suggested it for a black bordered set, but it wasn't really used. And then when that next silver bordered set came out, that's where he introduced it.
Sure. I'm guessing the number one reason why it didn't end up black border is because it's a 2-mana 2-card auto win combo with silence.
Yeah, it's pretty broken.
Instead of, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you guys mentioned that there are lots of cool cards, and that's true, because one of the points I wanted to get through also with this video is that there are a ton of black bordered cards that are more silver bordered than anything, particularly the chaotic cards like Scrambleverse, and Warp World. So it's curious how some do get the black bordered treatment, but some are like pariahs in silver bordered land.
Yeah, it's a little inconsistent, really. I mean, actually, with our philosophy for the set, we've actually got this delineation between what we call meta or arbitrary cards that basically have nothing to do with actual Magic mechanics, and that's why they're not allowed on that basis. But there's a lot of cards, the ones that usually are legal are the ones that have mechanics that would work perfectly fine in a normal black-bordered game. So,
Well, I think I'd probably take that with a little bit of pinch of salt, because although the separation between silver border and black border is often quite arbitrary, as you say, there are some things which I think they had a reason to not run in black border. Like, for instance, the combine mechanic where you take 2 cards and fuse them into 1 permanent. That they've created a more rules-friendly version of that with Meld in the Eldritch set.
Yeah, because originally they had done that with Big Furry Monster.
Yeah.
And that was like the inspiration that was the inspiration for the Meld. So it is interesting because, there are plenty of, because, Mark Rosewater loves his uncards. There's so many ideas that he said, I've had this for an unset, but I never used it, so use it here, like the flip cards in Kamigawa. That was also a silver bordered mechanic. I think there was a card from the Scratched Unglued 2 project, which was the original flip card. And I think he presented it in one of his blog posts on Wizards, and you could actually see that if you read one of those blogs.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if you pushed Infect through for Scars of Mirrodin, we might have seen that in an unproduct. Ugh.
Exactly.
Oh, well, that was one of the things which he had a kind of post for Unglued 2, that it was going to be vegetable themed with tainted vegetables giving you poison counters.
Yeah, and then that became poisonous in Future Sight in the Time Spiral block. And even
which they didn't end up using because Infect was just more streamlined.
Yeah, and Infect also isn't really that fun, quote unquote, when you think about it, because like if you're playing a silver bordered game and someone smacks you twice or thrice with a vegetable and you lose because of poison counters, that sounds more like, you know, competitive, you know, standard modern type thing, which is where Infect is usually prevalent.
It's also just a bad game mechanic because it doesn't interact with life gain and all that, which is like a core tenet of the game. So it's just not a very good mechanic. Sorry, Mario. I know it's your baby, but
yeah, I get it.
I think it's all right, kind of as something which they do once in a while. But I don't think it should be evergreen or anything. It's very much a once in every few years.
Yeah, well, at least they do return to old mechanics, because for Commander, the Teferi's Protection, they brought back phasing, which was a very complicated mechanic back in the day. I remember playing phasing when it came out, and it was such a headache. And even then, for me, they made it even a bit more complicated, because now phasing depends on the untap step. Before, phasing was like its own phase, you know, no pun intended. But now phasing is tied to the untap, so it's like, all right, so if they do one card with phasing like every 10 years, I guess that's fine. And I can't say the same for banding, because banding sliver came out in the test card. So
I couldn't believe they printed Teferi's Teferi's Protection. Honestly, I thought it was a joke. Yeah, I'm so glad they did though. But yeah, it's bringing back old mechanics and introducing these weird sort of corner elements of the rules. That's basically what Commander is for me initially. I mean, don't know about you, but player demographics wise, definitely a Melvin here. Love messing around with weird mechanics.
Yeah, so do I, which is why, you know, I like trying to delve deep into these kinds of cards. For example, the cube I built that, you know, now that I have it, is obviously like an ever changing, ever evolving thing. I have a ton of silver bordered cards in there, but not cards that are like game warping where you have to like arm wrestle or work with fractions. Yeah.
Exactly. We've got the same philosophy there, then, basically.
And I think that's a good way also for Commander players to dip their toes into these unsets, because even when Maro was designing Unsanctioned, I think he has 2 articles on it in the mothership. He was saying, oh, like, I want to avoid these things. And one of the things he said he wanted to avoid was like having to say things and fractions, which is why these new cards, they like work with art or being wordy, you know, all these, you know, classic silver bordered mechanics. But he wanted to steer clear from those because they realized they weren't fun.
Yeah, well, you see that actually as a progression throughout the unsets, where the meta mechanics just drop out slowly. They decrease in each set as they go along, because they realise that, yes, they're jokes, yes, they're funny, people enjoy that aspect of it, the humour, but they also want to be able to actually play a game with them.
Exactly. And I think that's fine because, for example, even a card in Commander like Animate Library, which is completely busted, because, oh, my library is like at 80 cards, I just animated it, it's an 80-80, like I can give it trample or something, I just took out somebody from the table, or, you know, casted a fling, and the fling doesn't even mill your library, it just destroys the enchantment, but you just gave 80 damage to the face. Like, even that card isn't as broken because there are more broken things you can do with black bordered cards.
Yeah, I mean, I run Door to Nothingness in every 5-color deck that I have. I mean, I think if you don't, you're doing it wrong, honestly. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a good way also to like have your finger on the button. It's sort of like it creates like a Cold War kind of situation, where it's like if you try and kill me, like I'll take you out first, and then, you know, your things go out of the stack because you just died.
Yeah, Etherflux Reservoir as well. That's a classic one as well, isn't it?
Yeah, which is why I like, for example, Baron Von Count. What does Baron Von Count really do? Is like, okay, once the Doom counter reaches a certain point, then you have a Door to Nothingness.
Pretty much, yeah. So in addition to being a giant crosshair on the table, he's also quite a good political tool.
Exactly. There's just a lot of good cards, and, you know, for example, for someone who hasn't seen your website before, I'm glad if they're able to check it out. But one of the things I did want to say is this philosophy that you guys have. I imagine that's what made it a key part in this very lengthy ban list that you guys have. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So the kind of philosophy going in was that we were trying to provide a kind of alternative to the EDH Rules Committee's ban list, which they had up. That we, instead of just kind of banning the most problematic cards like Staying Power, and that sort of thing. We wanted to kind of create a philosophy for incorporating the cards into a kind of middle ground between black bordered and silver bordered. So we'd be taking the philosophy of black border going forward. So things like all printing should function the same, and that stuff should generally work in accordance with the rules. But we were also trying to fit in everything which we could into that philosophy from the unsets.
Yeah, so what would you say, for example, on base of that philosophy, which that's the philosophy I adhere to, like I don't want to have a eye staring match or holding my breath. There are those people who do like that, and that's fine because you have like these little like Mario Party style mini games in your Magic game.
Yeah.
But for example, what kind of, because for example, if I see, this is a very long ban list, but I think it might be easier also to say, okay, these types of cards are banned, so that way I don't have to look at the list. For example, okay, we don't allow fractions, so obviously any card that has fractional damage or fractional power or fractional mana, that's not used in the format. So more or less, what kind of unmechanics do you guys decided to steer away to keep it as close to black bordered as possible?
Well, basically it's just anything that would work in black bordered. So as long as it's not, this goes back to our sort of arbitrary tags here. So for example, it's a old-fashioned vampire, I believe it's called. It has death touch and lifelink during the nighttime. That's a bit random. I mean, your deck is randomly going to be stronger if you just happen to be playing at night as opposed to day. That's something it's called meta, because it's affecting something outside of the game, or it's being affected rather by something outside the game, and that's just not very fun. Or something like the Hurloon Wrangler has Denim Walk, I believe.
Yeah.
So do I have to suddenly like bear in mind, oh shit, I've got Commander game today, better not wear denim? I don't want to have to keep track of all that. That's just annoying little meta things. I mean, some people find that funny. I might find it funny once or twice. But if I'm playing like Magic the Gathering, I want to play like a proper game and win or lose based on the strength of my plays, what happens inside the game. I don't want to lose the game because I just happen to be wearing like a pair of glasses and someone cast blurry Beebles on me.
Yeah.
There's also the issue that it's a multiplayer format, and with a lot of these things, they're very open to interpretation. In two-player games, you can kind of get away with that sort of thing. Only two people need to agree. But if four people at the table need to agree every time a new situation comes up, that can really just bog down the gameplay. Like
Exactly.
the example which Shadowland mentioned with Old-Fashioned Vampire. What if it's dusk and two people at the table think that it's day and two people think that it's night? There isn't really a proper way to resolve that.
Yeah, likewise, for example, most of these games in your format, which I'll get into a bit later, for example, let's say we're playing online like X-Mage or Cockatrice, and for example, for me, it's daytime, but you guys, you have a 4-hour difference, and for you, it's nighttime, so like is my, Nightmare Moon or is my Vampire, does it have what it's supposed to have, or Circadian? They're like, is it going to have Vigilance? Is it going to have Flying? Yeah.
Quantum Vampire. Yeah, no, that's why we call it a philosophy, really. And you've picked up the word, or maybe used it before already, even before finding our website. But it's the correct word, really, because what it is it's a way for people to think about the format and just instantly, intuitively make sense. Like, oh, this card cares about what colour clothes I'm wearing. That's silly. Funny, but silly. So it's got no place in a black-bordered game. Therefore, you don't even have to look at our website most of the time once you're familiar with the philosophy. You just go, this doesn't make sense. It's not legal.
Exactly. And other things I noticed, for example, because I believe, like, for example, for me, the best way to, like, to have other players interested is to have them, play with the cards, which is one reason why the rules committee, like, okay, for 6 weeks, they're all legal except for these. A lot of people were really upset, but I also wonder, like, do you realize when you're playing like black bordered Magic, there are these cards that appear more silver bordered than black bordered? For example, X. I think X is now leading the poll in or X1, depending on when I'm releasing this video. But X as a commander, to me, is less broken than send triplets. For one thing, X doesn't have access to white, and you still have to figure out a way to put it in an opponent's hand, and then you have to pay 5 mana each time to cast something. But with send triplets, you have something that only costs 2 mana, I can cast it, and then I can keep casting things as long as I can pay for the mana. But with X, you have to pay 5 mana each time. Even, you have a Farseek, okay, that's a 5 mana Farseek for me. But okay, sure, you have something that's 6 or 7 mana, it's only 5, but X is way more diluted in terms of power than send triplets is. But people are fine playing against send triplets, but not X.
Yeah, it's just
a brilliant card.
Yeah, and the only thing he really kind of does over the line is allows people to have cards in their hand which they don't own, and that seems to be kind of a minor thing to me, especially seeing as nowadays when people are playing, they nearly always have different coloured sleeves, so it isn't too much of an issue to tell which cards are which.
People are also used to effects like that from online card games like Hearthstone or what's it called, Gwent, things like that. Stealing cards from your opponent's not uncommon nowadays, even if it's a little harder to do.
Yeah, and even then, for example, you're supposed to reveal your hand when he's there, but then again, that's also another effect that's super common in Magic. Telepathy, there's just a whole bunch of other cards that, allow you to see an opponent's hand. So, for example, I would rather play against X than send triplets because I know send triplets is going to give me a bigger headache than X is.
I mean, send triplets is just boring, generic, good stuff as well. X is interesting and weird. That's why we play Commander, right? It's not to be like a competitive EDH player and just, combo off on turn 2.
Yeah, there's so many tame cards for even the more recent one, Unstable. For example, I wouldn't want a player using Old Buzzbark because what's to say that when they have all these dice so far up in the air and they drop them, it doesn't ding any cards because that's card damaging. Like when they mentioned banning Nerf War those 6 weeks, so I can get some cards, but for example, there are so many just tame cards like Phoebe. Phoebe is super tame. Timmy is tame.
Going back to Buzzbark, that's a good example of our philosophy of play there, because you literally pointed it out just there. The dice, you have to carry them a certain height above, and it's very random and hard to interpret exactly. Banned. Not allowed, because it's got those little meta elements, which is a bit of a shame, because Buzzbark's a cool card. But it's applicable, easily applicable.
Yeah, I would have preferred a contraption commander than Buzzbark, honestly, because contraptions were like mainly around, the Goblin Explosioneers. But I mean, Maro and his decisions, I guess.
And for whatever reason, didn't.
Sorry, you go, man.
And for whatever reason, they didn't take the opportunity to rectify that in Unsanctioned and bring out a contraption commander like they did with Host Augment and the Surgeon General.
They give you your Augment Commander.
Yeah, and he even mentioned in that article that the reason he did, do the Surgeon Commander was that a lot of people were upset that, Julius Jumblemorph was only white, green. And I was also thinking, well, if you gave him all creature types, why not just give him all colors, but still have him cost, white, green? Just one simple line of text would have solved so many problems. And then they made the Augment Commander, which is, for me, isn't really an Augment Commander because, okay, you draw a card when you combine a host and an augment, but Julius lets you tutor for the other half, so that's more helpful because you need basically 2 cards to make 1 card.
Yeah, that Julius is a lot more mechanically interesting for that reason.
Unfortunately, there's just not enough sense to actually run it in 2 colors without getting severely locked down by what you can play. It doesn't have that critical mass to make a deck archetype possible in Commander because you can only run singleton.
And that even opens the floor up. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it did seem to be that with the Surgeon General that the most viable way to build him was using auras, like the deck tech which you did, Demented Kirby. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be probably the most competitive way to build him, which is a bit sad if the card was specifically aimed at providing a 5-color Host Augment commander.
Yeah, and when I was brewing it, I was having such a hard time because, for example, okay, I have some augment cards in my hand, but no hosts. Or, okay, I have hosts, I play them, and then by the time I would draw into like an augment card I wanted for the host, because there are some really cool host augment combos, and I just found that as a commander, it wasn't really helping me with the mechanic it's supposed to be flushing out, because mutate, we still don't know what it is. But then I said, okay, well, let me add some auras. Maybe that would help out. And then it became more clunky, but then I noticed, okay, every time, I would play an aura, I would draw something, and I said, okay, this is the direction I would have to take this commander in order to make it work, which is sad because, at the end of the day, Julius Jumblemorph is still the best host augment commander, which was the complaint in the first place, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, that is a shame. It's although you've done a video on the recent, what are they? The celebration cards, the one that can partner with legendaries and all that.
Yeah,
that can expand his colours out a little bit. Although I would also like to point out that's a little broken, and me and Hamster are currently discussing what exactly to do with that in the set. Actually.
Yeah, you mean Soul Advocate Eternal, but I think Soul gives legendary. You can partner it with a card that isn't legendary. So, for example, Soul. Oh, you want to partner Soul with Avacyn's Pilgrim? Go ahead, but you can't partner Soul with Kiki Jiki, for example.
Interesting. So that's the conclusion you came to as well. We didn't initially think that was the intent, but we were interested in interpreting it that way, just because otherwise it is. I mean, if you can add it to anything, then you might as well add it to anything, which means that it becomes an auto include, which is not good.
Yeah, that card is fine in the sense that, okay, it might be degenerate if you add, a non-legendary creature that would make it broken, but I think this card was made sort of like maybe teasing or hinting at in the future, because so many people want to use the Nephilim as the commander or other non-legendary creatures as commander, which I understand, Sheldon doesn't want that because that's not in the spirit of the format. But if there is a way for you to have a mechanic in a commander for you to have it, then I guess, that's like the middle ground. That's like the sacrifice. Okay, I have one less card in the deck if I'm able to, have a card that isn't legendary as my commander.
Yeah, well, you've got a legendary card who's big as Hype Man or his boss or something. So, yeah, it kind of works thematically. Before,
Commander released the partners, I was, experimenting with, this custom format I called Boss and Mini Boss, where you could partner any two legendary creatures as long as they shared a color. And, for example, you couldn't cast the Boss unless the Mini Boss was cast first. And then they came out with partners, and I'm like, okay, this problem is solved then. But for example, that's how I see it also. And curiously, which is finally, I think, we got to where I wanted to get to, You're in Command, which is one of the test cards. During the game, I instantaneously bought it for my cube, and I regretted it a bit because it's like $10 less now than what I spent for it. But, it is a Commander cube, so I had to put it there. And it's like, okay, I animated this land. Now it's my commander. You shot yourself in the foot because you can't play a land from the command zone. But let's say, okay, I have Elbrus, and it transforms. So now I make that my commander, and now it goes to the command zone as the artifact version. So I think that's pretty interesting, and hopefully they learn on this and they put it in Commander Legends, because as you mentioned earlier, Enchantment Ties, I think it's called, which is a test card that makes whatever it's enchanting an enchantment. They reprinted that in Theros.
Yeah, I'm very glad to see them being more experimental and interesting with mechanics.
Yeah, so at least, there are, because I like to also think of it, because Maro does it also, in terms of rules, and they have, their own people who tell Maro, oh, you can't do this, it breaks the rules. So looking at it like through a lawyer perspective, like through a lawyer point of view, for me, if anything has a precedent, or at least hinted at enough that it almost seems to be a precedent, it's almost like they might do it in the future, because understanding, where they come from, they do tend to do things like a year in advance. So sometimes you're like, oh, they made a mistake in Throne of Eldraine with Oko. So maybe, we're not safe from something as inherently broken as Oko, because maybe they designed these sets so far in advance that they already started printing the next set or whatever, and they don't have the time to halt it, to ban a similar card. So maybe all these years they've been working on Commander Legends to have a draftable Commander experience is because, honestly, they want to make money. Because how are we going to open booster packs if we're drafting? And, and that's the ultimate, the ultimate equalizer. For example, oh, this player, his decks are too overpowered, but this player, they're starting, their deck isn't that overpowered, it's a bit underpowered. But if I buy a booster box of Commander Legends, everyone's at the same power. So I feel like hopefully all these mechanics that they're, they dip their toes in, because now Maro's using the term uncommander, which, not to get anybody confused, that's not what you guys are doing. You guys aren't, uncommander. You have like your own, philosophy and your own rule set. But for
We'd like to be uncommander. He's stealing our name. How dare he?
yeah, that's true. But, unfortunately, like maybe in the future it might have to change, but he has called it this, like in writing. You can see it in articles, on the mothership, not just his Twitter. Oh, for those of you playing uncommander, like, okay, Maro, you're calling it uncommander. Why do I not find any information on that? Which is, what drew me to your site in the first place. And
good. Come to our website.
Yeah.
Yeah, I must say that I'm afraid I wasn't aware that he was actually literally calling it uncommander. But I thought that he normally said silver bordered.
Hey man, free
when referring to it.
Yeah, that's free marketing for the moment until WotC or Hasbro catches wind of your little project. But
excellent.
And then we're just.
I would love a position at WotC. Come on, hire me. Why not?
Yeah, well, they'll give you your bonus in Magic cards because apparently, it's you should be thankful for working there. But hey, if I get some Happy Holidays promos, so be it.
That'd be nice. All I'm saying is, if considering that we have to clean up a lot of what Maro puts out sometimes, I think we've kind of done our internship already.
Yeah, also, that's another thing that I wanted to jump into, so thanks for bringing it up. I noticed also that you guys like heavily errata all these cards that are a bit, obscure or hard to follow, especially the ones that aren't, legit WotC cards, which I think you guys call the unorthodox supplement. So before we get into that part, because you guys do have two different formats, like what kind of reasoning do you have for like heavily errating these things, and have you guys tested it to see if people intuitively follow these erratas, or do they have to go and make sure, let me double check the site to see if I'm playing this card correctly? How has that worked when you guys were testing, or if you guys have had any play groups where you've worked with these cards?
Hamster's got most of the playtesting experience here with his IRL group, so.
Yeah, that's unfortunately we live quite far away from each other IRL, so we're not really able to do any. We haven't really been able to do any play testing together. However, I've been able to introduce Uncommander to a local games group and played a few games there. Thus, not really anything too conclusive from the moment. That unfortunately the group is kind of fairly new to Commander as a whole, so. It's not like they're experienced Commander players who've got a lot of kind of perspective on the format.
If you want to help us playtest, come join us at our Discord.
Yes, that's true. I'll give you guys the opportunity to shamelessly plug a couple of things so that people can, be more open to what you guys are doing. But that's interesting that you mentioned, the difficulty of playtesting, because, for example, Cockatrice or X-Mage, these are programs where obviously, you can't have eye staring contests or, arm wrestling contests. You can't, flip a card onto the table. So here's where I found it's easier. You also can't have fractional damage because, they do it in intervals of whole numbers. So this is also a good way, for example, for people if they want to test, certain silver bordered cards without having to buy it or find people to play it. You could just open a room and call it Uncommander, or open a room and say, with silver bordered cards, or open a room and say, okay, at least with what the rules committee say, but with what's actually viable. Because, for example, Falling Star and Chaos Orb, they're banned, obviously. Yep. So why allow other cards that have a similar function not be banned, like, the Mantis Wrestler, I forget its name right now. Or
Slaying Mantis. Yeah,
Slaying Mantis, or the Goblin Sleigh Ride, where you have to literally put a card on it and slide it across the table. I mean, that's dexterity if I've ever heard it, or Clay Pigeon, which
and
was...
they're all gone.
Exactly. So, I mean, there are some inconsistencies, which is what I like about your philosophy, where you're trying to do your best to keep it as consistent as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very hands-off approach for normal Commander and the rules committee there. Sheldon Menery and his I don't know all their names off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but they want to try and not touch it as much as possible and hope that playgroups will self-police, which mostly they do. Yeah,
which is rule zero from what I hear.
Yeah, but it's when you're dealing with cards as weird as this, and the fact that it's also not even, I mean, Commander wasn't official for a long time, it was sort of semi-official, but it had a lot of steam and momentum behind it.
Yeah.
So when you want to introduce something and get someone to play it, you really need to give them like a really consistent, logical rule set that makes sense and feels fair, as opposed to just random arbitrary stuff and people hurling cards everywhere and say, "Hi, I get to rip your deck in half now," and other stupid things like that.
Yeah, and it's
that was the turn one combo, wasn't it? When the silver border cards, someone posted like a combo in the comments immediately saying, "This is how you tear your opponent's deck in half legally." I was like, "Oh, God's sake!"
Yeah, exactly. With I think it was Chaos Confetti, and then that's when Sheldon had to step in. Okay, no Nerf war, because people were already talking about these huge like 200 round Nerf guns, to just destroy somebody's deck from across the room.
It's just I saw that coming from like a mile away. We both did, me and Hamster.
Well, I mean, you are gonna have the spikes. It's like, oh, silver border is legal now. All right, let me like be as spiky as possible. And
there's not really that much there though. That's the thing, even for spikes.
Because staying power is banned because Angel's Grace and cards like that, where it says, okay, until the end of the game you can't lose. Well, as long as staying power is there, you can't lose. But then also there are 2 card combos that do that also. For example, Phyrexian Unlife, as long as you don't get any poison counters, you can't lose either because your life can't drop down to 0. It's it's very hard to take you out. But for
yeah. So here though, I think this is the thing. We're not trying to replace the rules committee for Commander. That's not our place. We don't have that authority or that power. What we're trying to do is create sort of an add-on for it. So the bits that we have power over, Dominion, the silver bordered, we will balance them as best we can, but we don't have the authority to overstep the rules committee. Should the rules committee ban that combo? Maybe. That's definitely an argument that can be had, but it's not it's not really in our power to do it, I don't think.
Yeah, because you guys, for example, you're not like a different format. You're not like Oathbreaker or something like that, where you're banning your own cards. You're literally just, okay, so this is just normal Commander. If you want to add silver bordered cards, it's like more like a guide where you guys can like help people. Okay, like these would be the best ones if you want to start.
Yeah.
Because I've seen crazy cubes when they add all the mini game cards, even Charizard, and like there's no way I'm playing multiplayer Commander and have somebody cast Charizard. Like, okay, I'm out. Like, whatever. And even then, technically, I would have to, scoop twice because the first scoop is for the minigame. So, even then, Charizard doesn't let me scoop. I have to scoop twice, per the rules. But at least, for example, like, and even the command zone, they've mentioned it multiple times also, like Josh Lee Kwai, he said, why don't you guys, for these commanders, at least these legendary creatures, do something to make them legal, like a little symbol or something. And I don't even think it's that complicated. Just say, okay, any legendary creature would be legal if it's silver bordered, because it's not about making all these other like Brainiac or some other cards legal. It's just, okay, silver bordered cards legal. Like if I want to play with Grimlock Dinobot Leader, I can, but technically I can't. But for example, a lot of what I do to try and open people's eyes to silver bordered is, for example, all of these deck techs I've made this month, thanks to Unsanctioned, they hardly have any silver bordered cards in it. Like very few of them do, and it's only because it works well with it. For example, I included Earl of Squirrel in A Cornelia because obviously if you don't, like, why bother building A Cornelia if you're not going to have Earl of Squirrel? But for example, Surgeon Commander, I didn't put any silver bordered card in there. Like you're not going to see it because what's the point? I'm not building it host augment. I'm building it like Aura's Matter. But notice that in and of itself, it's a tame card. Like there are so many cards like it. Like all the enchantresses, the moment you cast an Aura, you're going to draw a card. And Siona, she's a commander that has the same wording. It's like when the Aura is attached. So when the Aura is attached, now when you cast it, okay, it's attached to Siona, you get an effect. So with with Surgeon General, you attach it to a creature you control, you get an effect. And then it taps for Wooburg, like a Bird of Paradise. So why is this card silver border? Because it's a Wombat Bat Chameleon, because Chameleon would technically be a lizard in black border. And even then, in silver border, they fix it. Oh, we don't have chickens anymore. They're birds.
Yeah, we like to try and apply our art like that consistently if we can. Yeah, and the general principle with creature types is that if the creature type has been errated to something in black border, like say Malus have been errated to be elephants, and if there isn't kind of a distinct identity with that creature type, then we'll generally follow the black bordered philosophy and errata it So, for instance, Domesticated Mammoth from the test cards for Mystery Booster was printed as a mammoth, but we've eroded it to be an elephant.
Which makes sense because every single card that says mammoth or literally shows a woolly mammoth is an elephant.
Yeah. Except for some of the silver border ones, but that's just because, I mean, they don't have priority with the rules committee at WotC, do they? I mean, they've got a job to do. They don't have time to waste on, silver border cards that aren't legal in any tournament format, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Unless you're a chicken, which in this case, then you went the way of the falcon. But now that you mentioned the test cards, it's interesting because the test cards, they aren't legal anywhere. Like even with Maro's on Commander, which if you looked at his recent articles, like he has 2 articles explaining, how unsanctioned came to be, which was, honestly a rush job, but I'm not going to get there. What made you guys want to include the test cards in your Uncommander versus the other format you have, which I'll hope to get to in a moment? Yeah. Why would you include the test cards there if they're not really silver bordered cards? Is it because they are actual cards, or is there some other reasoning behind it?
Well, I mean, yeah, Uncommander, the whole point of it is just to make cards legal in Commander, which is the right format for weird and wacky and wonderful cards like this. As long as they're not actually mechanically too strong or broken or don't work, then yeah, we like to include as many as we can. The actual factor for allowing something into Uncommander versus Unorthodox, which is our even weirder format,
yeah,
we'll talk about that later probably. The only criteria really is that it has to have a physical printing. You have to be able to actually acquire it. Because, otherwise there's no actual, real, legit way to play Unorthodox. That's basically it. I mean, we like it. We like a lot of the weird cards there, but we can't really, you can't actually put them in a deck without doing the thing.
Yeah, you'd have to proxy them, which.
Oh, we said it.
Yeah, or play it online, but obviously, But I mean, in this case, you're not proxying a Black Lotus, and honestly, there are famous proxy people who do proxy really nice cards, but it is a proxy. For example, for my cube, I haven't put them yet, but there's a lot of cards that I like that you guys have included in your Unorthodox supplement, which is some of the cards that are only available on the online games. For example, Magic has had 2 different video games. One is the Astral set, and the other was like the Sega Dreamcast set, which is in Japanese, by the way. So either way, it had to be translated. So some things, unless you do the Oracle wording, will be lost in translation. But those cards
apologize for bad translations, by the way. Neither of us speak Japanese.
Yeah, well, but at least it's there, and it's interesting. And you also have like the Arena Player Rewards card, which are only legal in Historic, which is unsupported by Wizards anyways. So, but for example, right there's a card called Inspiring Commander, which is a better Mentor of the Meek, because when the creature that's that low powered creature enters the battlefield, you just automatically draw a card, and it's in white. Why is this not printed in actual cards when you have all these players clamoring for white card draw?
Because Commander, Wizards hate white in Commander, obviously.
The thing is, white and red. These are colors that are really powerful in 60 card decks, because, for example, white, you're gaining life, and unless you are being attacked with poison, there's really no way to lower your life down. And then white also has a lot of targeted removal. But let's be honest, like if you're playing mono white and you're facing 3 opponents, you have to be really careful or very political, which is ironic for white, with what to get rid of. Oh, you have Oblivion Ring, you have Swords to Plowshares, you have all these other effects. Okay, but that's only one. It's in a multiplayer game. You're not really going to have that advantage. And red is the same thing. Like I've seen red decks, just brutally, turn 2, deal enough damage to win, but you can't do that in Commander. So if Wizards is worried about the power level of cards in Standard or Modern, don't print these cards in Standard and Modern sets. Give it to us in these supplemental sets like Battle Bond, Conspiracy, or Commander products. Why not print those cards in Commander products? Because that's where the cards are going to go. No one in Eternal, no one's going to take out a Boros Vintage deck. If you're not playing blue or black in Vintage, you're not playing Vintage. So I think it is good that you guys have some of those cards included. But for example, like a rundown, like what cards do you guys include in this Unorthodox supplement besides like the video game official Wizards of the Coast cards? What other cards do you include, and more or less why did you guys include it in this other supplement?
So with Unorthodox, we're including cards which don't have a available printing, which you can get hold of. And we've also decided to include cards which have been published in magazines, like the Duelist Magic's official magazine, which is now discontinued, but they made a number of weird and wacky cards to as part of that, which you could cut out and use.
It's important to note that they have a very thin veneer of legality, though. That's the point. By this logic, we could include like completely fan-made sets, and we'd rather not do that. It's as long as they've got some shine of sort of legitimacy, that lets them get in. But otherwise,
because
we're not going to be adding like full sets off of cards. Or whatever.
Yeah, because they're not custom cards technically. They do have, like, for example, if it's in the Duelist, which was run by like Marrow at some point, if I'm right, and Wizards employees, then okay, yeah, it's cool. Like, we have these, and those are probably the first like technically uncards because they are poking jabs at themselves. But it is curious that the only way you can get these cards is literally cutting them out and gluing them onto an actual Magic card, which I think were the instructions to do these kinds of things.
And that's why we can't allow them in the standard Uncommander set, because it's not the legitimate card, basically. Not a legitimate physical card.
And how would they work together, for example? Because I know that you guys, I don't know if there's any spoilers here, but you guys mentioned Unglued 2 earlier in the conversation. Like, how would they incorporate like these cards that are unobtainable, to put it that way, and then the silver border? Do you guys have a way where you can free for all, like add whatever cards you can as long as it follows the philosophy?
That's what Unorthodox is, basically. It's not free-for-all. I suppose Unorthodox is free-for-all. It's like another add-on. So you have normal Commander, and then you can either add Uncommander on, or you could add Unorthodox, which is also Uncommander on. So you can either play with like just legitimate WotC cards, but they're silver stuff, or you can play with everything, like no holds barred, Unorthodox.
Yeah, that's how I built my cube, actually, because, and I haven't had a lot of time to play with it because I've been busy with other things, but when I did test the cube, like the first time I built it, I didn't even invest in it. I just got a whole bunch of cards I had laying around, which hopefully I can make a video about, if you want to get started with a cube, more or less what to do. But I just got a whole bunch of cards laying around, and I said, all right, I'm going to have 100 green cards, 100 white cards, this many colorless cards, and then all the commanders that I had at the moment, every legendary creature, whether they were good or bad or not, or if I had too many green commanders or red commanders, it didn't matter because we were going to draft it. And then I had a whole bunch of silver cards laying around, obviously, because I can't have them in any decks. And then what I notice a lot, for example, in play groups, is that there's always this arms race. And for example, there's always the person who's ahead, and that's fine, but they get either kicked out of the game or there's a lot of salt flowing. But when I had this cube and then we all drafted it, it was laughs all around because someone literally drafted a card they were, hysterically laughing, and it was Clock Napper. And I realized it later because they literally, they used it at a moment where I had everything tapped. And then it came to my turn. I couldn't use anything because they stole the beginning of my phase, and then they beat me with it. But that person wasn't using Brago. For example, Brago would seriously break Clock Napper if it's not dealt with. But in this situation, it was pretty tame because like all the cards are more or less at the same power level. Swords to Dungeons and Dragons, that's another card that comes to mind. That card's pretty tame. Like Protection from Rogues and Clerics, who even plays with those creature types as a tribe. But being able to make a gold dragon is pretty interesting, which also brings me to the point when you have a card that produces mana of any color and you're playing Uncommander. Can I say, I make a gold mana, or do I make pink mana because Giant Teddy Bear is a pink token?
Yes,
absolutely, yes.
Although that's a very niche case, yeah.
And that's interesting because
you can actually make a deck around it.
Yes, that's what I was going to get at.
I've made a decking and commander to kind of showcase the kind of consequences of having these additional colors in the format. And it isn't just the additional colors. That there's a water gun balloon game which adds the pink color because it produces a pink teddy bear, and there's a sort of Dungeons and Dragons which produces gold mana.
And Orthodox. We also have Pikachu, which creates yellow. Don't ask why he's in the game. Copyright incoming, I'm sure. And also purple cards, which were theorized in I think it was a Duelist, or was it?
It was Inquest. I think it was like an April Fool's kind of thing.
That was it. I always get the two mixed up.
Yeah, but that's fine because even then there's some gray area there. But what it does is it opens the doors because, for example, the first technically purple card, and I don't know if Wizards did it first in Duelist or if Inquest did it first in their April Fool's magazine, was that Throat Wolf, which was a card that was made as a test card. Throat Wolf actually existed as like this mythological card. Oh, like it's a purple card that nobody saw.
Yeah.
So even then,
an urban legend, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Sorry.
And for Time Spiral, they wanted to add a sixth color. They were really ambitious with the Time Spiral block. But what they ended up doing was, okay, let's just reprint really old cards that are not on the reserve list, give it a purple rarity, and okay, here are our purple cards. So they do try and do some precedent before. So for example, okay, you know, we're joking around about all these cards that are cutouts, but Wizards has, all right, they have officially recognized a cutout card before that they're putting in now. And I think they did it also with a card that mentions the dojo, because back then, the net decking problem that we have now, people, what they would do is they would look at magazines or go to events and then try to copy the best deck. So they mentioned that there, and in one of the test cards, they mentioned that, oh, cards that are in winning decks, cost 1 more mana to cast. I'll try and put up the cards on the screen when I get to editing the video. But these jokes that, they're trying to recycle, people are like, oh, this is so cool, but it's been done before. So one thing that's curious is that you guys do have, all these cards. So if people are, even if they're just curious, they can see, oh, these kinds of things have happened before, and it breathes new life into games, which, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't made a constructed deck yet of any of these kinds of cards. Because, for example, okay, let's say I have my, Dinobot, Grimlock Dinosaur tribal deck. If people say, no, like, that's banned, I don't want to play with it, okay, I'll just swap it out for a Gahiji, no harm done, because I don't have any other Silverboard cards in it. But it's odd because I would like to actually build around that commander. For example, a Cornelia, oh, I don't want to play with that. That's not legal in Commander. I can't play with the deck at all because it is built around, me casting cards with squirrels in its art. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, you can't really build around the commander if you need to have the possibility of swapping it out. So it'll just be a generic good stuff deck, which, I mean, they're okay, but they're not that fun. Like, they get a bit repetitive.
Yeah, and it is fun because, for example, on Cockatrice, because if you update Oracle, the good thing about Cockatrice, at least, no plugs here for Cockatrice, I'm not sponsored. But the good thing about Cockatrice is that when the Oracle is updated, they do include all these sets that aren't legal in anything, because at the end of the day, you can play Kitchen Table Magic and Cockatrice if you want to. So they do add the test cards, they do add the Happy Holidays promo, they do have, the silver bordered cards. The things they don't add are things that don't appear in Scryfall. So, for example, you guys mentioned some of these cutouts. I mentioned the Astral set. For me, I actually went through the trouble of typing it up, on XML and getting the card images and, inserting it as a quote-unquote custom set in Cockatrice, but that's just for testing purposes. But I have played games on Cockatrice where I've used not Soul, but for example the Legend of Arena, which is one of this year's released cards for Heroes of the Realm. And I thought it was really interesting that, this enchantment can be your commander, but then again, planeswalkers were able to be your commander. So again, it's not the first time that a non-creature is given that, this can be your planeswalker status. And they had to errata that onto also the Grand Calcutron, which is an artifact.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. He's an interesting one.
Yeah, so there are already 3 card types that have been allowed to be commander. So, and I dipped my toes into playing with the Legend of Arena. Incredibly broken, by the way. Like if you play it constructed, because it is good to build around, because you have blue proliferates and you have ways to take counters off it, so you can more or less play around with it. But at the same time, it doesn't make it that broken, because what are you doing? You're adding counters, you're taking counters away, and then if it reaches a 3rd chapter, you have to sacrifice it, and then it's back in your command zone. But it's something different to do. It's not just another Boros combat-based commander. It's not
That's
another,
why we want to introduce these cards, because they're so interesting and weird and fun to play, and they're exactly what Commanders is about. It's about messing around with these weird and wonderful mechanics.
Because even in Cube, for example, how do I more or less, because now I'm actually designing it, see, okay, what cards can I trade for, what cards can I invest in that aren't really expensive. Because honestly, like, if you're gonna share your cards with other people, you don't want them to like ding them with their nails or flick them around. So I'm trying to keep the prices of cards really low. But then I noticed, okay, I have 160 possible commanders in it that you can draft through. But then I'm looking through them to see what cards synergize with them. Oh, all these are Voltron. Oh, all these steel cards, or oh, all these are stacks commanders, and like they fall into an archetype. So that's good in terms of drafting, because I draft these cards based on my commander, so you can have 2 players with a Voltron. But then you look at all of these silver bordered commanders and all of these, Heroes of the Realm commanders like Nira, Hellkite Duelist, and Moto, the Gnarled Oracle, and they do things that no other commander card does. And I'm wondering if they're only doing this to spark interest because it's something so out of the box and so out there that they're afraid it'll flop, or if they're trying to see, there's lots of people on Twitter or, online super interested. All right, let's try and develop sets that include these mechanics, just to keep the format fresh.
I think with the Heroes of the Realm cards, it's mostly the design teams which won the awards getting to design their own dream cards. So I don't think it's too much Wizards of the Coast trying to push designs for those especially. But I'm sure they're quite interested in the feedback from people on them.
Yeah, because I have to find it to see if I remember correctly, but I did see a tweet about the Dungeon Master Hero of the Realm card, that those cards are so rare that it was either the artist who drew the card or the designer of the card. Even they didn't get a copy of the card. That was just for the Dungeons and Dragons team. So I'm like, that's cruel in a sense, like, But I mean, it is what it is. Like, you even have your name at the bottom of the card. Like, for example, if they gave it to such and such person, all right, their name is there. But
that's brutal.
Yeah, but even then, like, if I ever play against that person in a convention and the winner of Nira Hellkite Duelist takes it out, I'm not gonna say, oh dude, that card is banned. Like, no, there's only like 4 of them in existence. Like, take the time. Yeah, take the time. Soak it in, see what the card does, because you're not gonna have that happen in anywhere else.
Well, we're currently actually having this debate, myself and Hamster, and we were actually thinking of opening it up to a community poll sooner because we're in an impasse. But we're not entirely sure where to go with cards like that, because technically they are acquirable, so that does make them fall under the uncommander bracket, not the unorthodox bracket.
Well, technically,
because they're technically,
because technically, 1996 World Champion was also acquirable if you have 200 grand to buy it.
That's the point. Yeah,
and it's technically. And it's not exactly because and technically it's even in a case, so it's even in a sleeve, the ultimate sleeve, which is a 1996 World Championship trophy. So like,
imagine trying to sleeve that'd be difficult.
Yeah, well, at least the tuck rule is gone, so they don't have to shuffle it back into their deck.
You can still shuffle it in if you want to.
That is true. So that would be quite a thing to see. Like, if I play against that person, like, go for it, dude. Like, I'm not gonna call the rules committee on you.
Gee, I wonder where it is in his deck. Just massive.
Yeah, like rule 0.
2 cards.
Yeah,
I think he.
That's great. So for those wondering, in this case, what would you guys recommend for people who do want to test these kinds of things? Because you do have Uncommander, which is obviously readily accessible. Even the Happy Holiday promos, you guys have it in that section because you can go on TCG Player or eBay and actually get these cards. But for example, for all these really rare cards to get, because technically I can buy the Duelist and cut it out and paste it on a card. So, but it is in the unorthodox supplement. Or if, like, in some future somebody sells their Heroes of the Realm card for like 15,000 or something like that. But for those cards that aren't accessible, but I do want to play with them, obviously I'm not telling people go proxy it, or I'm not promoting proxying or using software that isn't made by Wizards, because technically Cockatrice isn't for playing Magic. You can play any card game on it. But for those people who really want to wrap their head around it, what would you guys suggest to do? Like, how to present it to a play group, or just how to try it out in general? What recommendations do you guys have for people?
To start with, I'd recommend picking some of the commanders from Unstable. That, I mean, if you wanted to, you could just play using a black bordered commander and just sprinkling in some silver bordered cards. But I think that to kind of really sell the format of Uncommander, the silver bordered commanders are a really good way of doing that, to showcase what can be done if you step outside the normal rules of Magic. Yeah,
I totally agree.
So, like,
Yeah, go ahead.
instance, the first deck which I made was the Big Idea deck, and he's a bit like a different twist on Krenko in terms of a commander which has an activated ability to create loads of creatures, and it snowballs as you get more. But he's a completely different take on it, because everything which he does is based around die rolling, which means that he synergizes with all other die roll effects.
Exactly.
Which means that stuff like
Croc's other thumb.
Caniac, yeah, exactly. That there's a whole bunch of synergy to explore there. So, I guess that's what I'd recommend doing for your first deck, is just pick one of the commanders from Unstable or Unsanctioned and run wild with it. But there's definitely other things you can do.
Yeah, I agree, because, for example, when the 6 weeks that the silver border cards were legal, that a lot of the complaints that people had that were really overjoyed by this is that doesn't give me time to buy the cards, to test the cards, to go and play a deck. But for example, if you already had a deck and you inserted silver border cards, that's where the opponents of the idea didn't like it, because, for example, okay, I have a Mazarek Kraul Death Priest deck, and the first thing I did was put in Organ Harvest. And, if I cast it, a lot of people like, oh, wow, that's great synergy, because obviously, I'm playing a stacks deck. I'm sacrificing creatures to get mana. And Organ Harvest isn't a card that isn't so out there, black border-wise. That card could have easily been black bordered, especially in Battle Bond, where you had a two-headed giant theme for the thing, and you had, oh, your teammate does this or your teammate does that. But I didn't take out, Nerf War out of nowhere. I'm just playing a random, is it Commander? Oh, here's Nerf War. But so I could understand why the opponents of it were against it, because, okay, I'm sitting out on this match and this person has, this silver bordered this black bordered commander, and then they're playing with all these really busted silver bordered interactions, which again isn't that different from black border. But okay, now we're gonna have an eye staring contest. What if that's not what I want to do? Or this person's just gonna straight up do the hokey pokey because they play the night of hokey pokey.
I've got some friends that they're not neurotypical, and some they might not want to make eye contact. Sometimes they find it quite anxious, or it's these things they sort of impinge on a lot of social norms, and that can be funny among friends. But you don't always play Commander with friends. There's pods. You go to local gaming stores, play Commander. Do you really want to have an arm wrestling match with someone you don't know?
Exactly. So for there, I do get it. But for example, if you see, and this is where you mentioned earlier, like start with a silver border commander, because if I see a silver bordered commander, I already know more or less what to expect. So the person might be a little bit on edge, like, oh, okay, they're playing silver bordered commander. Are they going to do all these crazy things that I'm not really, I don't want to do because it's not technically Magic? But if I sit down with a silver bordered commander and say, okay, more or less the deck does this, which you do anyways. That's part of the social contract, because you do want to inform people about, the power level of your deck. What I usually did when the 6 weeks they were legal is like, okay, here's my Mazarek Death Priest deck. It has some silver bordered cards, but nothing too out there. It's just to synergize with the commander. And people are like, well, some will bother, but like, it's okay. It's legal as long as you don't make me dance or do some stupid thing like that. I'm like, no. It's fine. There isn't even like any coin flipping or die rolling. I just have, this card. And the same with CDC. Ones. Yeah, the CDC, I had cards that cared about the graveyard, like Graveyard Busybody. Obviously, that card's amazing in a Reanimator, because if I say, your body double comes as a copy of this card, that's normal. You've seen that before. But if I play a Reanimate or another card that is from my particular graveyard, like Have and Go Lich, if I have Graveyard Busybody in play, then I could cast any creature from any graveyard, because technically they're all mine. So that's not something that's too broken. Obviously, in a CDC Brute Tyrant deck it is, but those 6 weeks it were legal. People couldn't complain, but then when they noticed at first, like, oh, this guy's playing, that kind of thing now that, we're against. But then as the game progressed, they're like, oh, that was a pretty interesting interaction. Like, at the end of the day, they were able to appreciate it, which is, I think, what the rules committee wanted in the first place. But now that that's gone, I'm glad that you guys, you're actually doing the work that they didn't do in the first time, not to throw shade at them, obviously, but they just said, okay, whatever.
They have a hands-off approach.
Exactly. It's like, enough. Whatever, rule zero. Like, everything is rule zero now. But,
But we want everything to be, we want it to feel fair. We want you to be able to rock up with a silver bordered deck, show it to your opponent, say, here's the website, here are all these rules.
Exactly.
They all make perfect sense. They've banned all the really egregious ones. There's nothing that's more broken than Cyclonic Rift, or or other existing combos in Commander. And in actuality, we actually ban a little under the power level of real Commander anyway, because we try not to let some of the egregious stuff go through. The Rules Committee should really probably ban.
Yeah, exactly. And because I noticed you also ban a lot of like things that have to do with real life. For example, Avatar of Me, which is something that I can understand is banned because, for example, if we're playing, as I mentioned, over the internet, how can you tell if blue are my eye color or green or brown? And then that also opens the door like, okay, so you have brown eyes, so now you're adding even another color. Like, okay, so now
Granny's Revenge or whatever it is as well. Like that's just unfair because I mean, if my great grandma wants to play against me, I don't want to give her an unfair advantage.
Exactly. Well, technically you do because you want to be the good great grandson, right?
Absolutely not. She needs to get good or I will crush her.
Because I can understand, like, for example, you have like the 40-something-year-old store owner always playing against, the up-and-coming Timmy. He's like 14, 15, and he's like this 40, 30-something-year gap advantage. So yeah, I can understand how that could be a problem.
Exactly. It's not fair.
Yeah. But I think that is a good starting point, which is why I wanted to invite you guys, to have this sort of podcast dynamic, because I do talk about silver border cards in the video, and then, but where's like the middle ground? There is no middle ground. It all depends entirely on your play group, and I don't want people to feel like if they want to play with these cards, they're only limited to their local meta or their play group, or amongst their friends, which is, for example, if people do want to insert them in their cube, technically, that's what, Unsanctioned was promoted as. Oh, this is for Commander and Cube. But they're not legal in Commander, and people either way do a queue with whatever they want. So really, what are you offering me? Which is where Maro mentions Uncommander a bunch of times. He literally says in the article, I don't know if you guys have a chance to read it. I'll send you the link later if I can. He says, "Oh, when we made Unstable, we noticed that there was only allied colored uncommanders. So what we wanted to do for Unsanctioned was make enemy colored uncommanders." So he's mentioning quite often. So I don't know if that's something they'll do in the future or not. But at least for the moment, if people, if they buy Unsanctioned and they want to have at least some guide rules, they can go to your site and then get even more ideas of what to do, because, they are getting the cards in the first place. And if there's something I don't like, is to have cards I can't use.
Yeah, exactly. And Commander's the one format where you can't use them all. I mean, technically you can in Vintage, but I mean, it's so high-powered that,
Either way, exactly. You're not going to... okay, let's say Black Lotus was unbanned today. Who's going to play Black Lotus in Commander anyways? That's like worth more than every single deck in the room combined.
The competitive EDH groups would do it, but that's almost a different format than from standard Commander, isn't it? Because it's so optimized and... it's quick.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just it's 9s and 10s
so
basically.
It would probably self-police, but we have actually banned Mirrored Lotus, which is the just Black Lotus, because there's no one's going to use that fairly. Yeah. It is just going to be a combo tool for competitive EDH. So we thought we'd best not allow it, even though it isn't as powerful as Black Lotus.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, you also have some cards that are almost along the same vein as the Rules Committee saying, "Oh, use these cards with caution." You do have some cards that you haven't outright banned, but you do say, "Oh, like use with caution," or be careful when you're playing them. What sort of ideology do you guys have behind those kinds of cards?
Generally, anything which is marked use with caution either kind of requires a bit of kind of looking stuff up, or it has a potential to be problematic either kind of balance wise or in terms of very complex interactions. So, for example, watermark cards, which we've added, that most printing specific elements like artist credit and such, we haven't allowed in Commander, as they're usually fairly arbitrary, and if we're using different versions of cards, it can get quite confusing.
Yeah, I understand.
And so yeah, to fit our general philosophy of having all cards with the same name function identically, we've generally not allowed interactions with printing specific elements. Watermarks have been an exception, though, because they've had a history of being representative of different factions in the Magic multiverse. So they're almost like another creature type, something which has some kind of thematic and lore connection.
They're like a property.
The Selesnya Guild, for example.
Yeah, but the issue is that not every printing of, say, Watchwolf, a Selesnyan card, has the Selesnya watermark.
Exactly.
Only the original printing and a few other ones. So with cards which interact with watermarks, you need to be aware of that, and you need to have a good idea of what cards have watermarks and what don't, which is why it's marked as use with caution.
Yeah, and those that are inherently broken also, for example, Slivdrazi Monstrosity, like even if you're not playing Sliver Tribal, it's still being able to create a 1/1 with Annihilator 1 for the 3 mana.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are two different sort of qualifiers for making a card yellow, which we have a traffic light system. Green is legal, red is banned, yellow is legal but careful. Some of them are the ones that, like Hamster has mentioned, that require just a bit of extra prep work. You need to bring in the random tables, or you need to have like the table up for Urza, the headmaster. Sorry, but some yellow cards are yellow simply because we can't come to a conclusion or come to a good guess as to whether they are just too strong and whether they should be banned on power level reasons. So that would be Slivdrazi Monstrosity. It's strong, but we're not sure if it's stronger than some competitive EDH commanders, or whether it is bad for the game, basically.
Yeah, because you do need not just all 5 colors, but a colorless source to cast it, so it does have at least that restriction.
Yes, but Annihilator has been branded an unfun mechanic by WotC after all, even though I don't personally agree, but I do think yellow is about right. But that's what the Discord is for, by the way. Come join us on our Discord, second plug. We will be running polls to actually decide these sort of things. It's a community-run one. We're very transparent with our decisions. We actually have a lot of little notes on our website about how and why we made certain decisions to try and spark discussion, make it all seem logical. People can read it and go, yeah, this makes sense. These guys thought this through. They didn't just randomly ban cards they think were too strong.
Yeah.
And if you do think that we kind of haven't given a thorough enough explanation on a particular case, then just drop us a question on the EDH Silver Discord server, and we'll try and respond as best as we can.
Come yell at us. We love it.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to mention. For example, a lot of these yellow cases, like with enough people play testing it or with enough interest, they might even tell you, oh, okay, in theory it's busted, but in practice not so much, or vice versa. Maybe this card that's green in theory wasn't so busted, but now it might need to be banned because, for example, just up to discussion, Cyclonic Rift would be banned, Flash would be banned. So
I hate that card.
So, but for example, like how warping would it be? Because it like for opponents, it's unfair, but for proponents, they say, but this puts a lot of cards in check. And the same thing for Flash. Like no Timmy's playing Flash, but then you have all these spikes playing Flash, and even then, is really Flash the problem, or is Protean Hulk the problem? Because there was a time where Protean Hulk was banned and Flash was an opponent. I honestly, honestly, I think, this is tinfoil hat territory, that the unbanned probably came because Protean Hulk was reprinted in a master set.
Yeah, I've heard that theory too, actually. It does kind of make sense. And
then, for example, Iona finally being banned, and I can understand more the salt for Iona than Cyclonic Rift, because, all right, Cyclonic Rift puts back at least 3 other players, and it gives an advantage to 1. But then again, if somebody plays Planner Cleansing, and then in response they play Boros Charm, making their permanents unblockable, that costs almost as much as an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, and it was worse because it erased everything. It didn't, bounce things back to your hand. So, there are arguments on both sides of the fence. But, for example, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying there's definitely a difference between power level and how feels bad something is. Like, some cards are incredibly strong, but they don't get picked up by more casual players because they don't feel like bad to lose to. But if you hit someone with like Stone Rain, they're gonna feel bad about that because we've been conditioned to hate land destruction. And it is, I kind of get it, because you're basically not being allowed to play Magic if all your lands have been blown up. But it's not mechanically strong from a purely objective standpoint. If you're looking at winning the game, there are strategies for it, but it's not it's not incredibly broken and powerful.
Yeah,
some cards are disproportionately hated. Also, I do hate Cyclonic Rift. I just want to set the record straight there. Screw that card.
When I have all my tokens out. For example, if I'm playing Zada and I have, let's say, 1 billion tokens out, because that's not too far out there for what I've seen Zada do. Both myself and other people play it, and then in response, somebody cast the Cyclonic Rift. If I drew into like 80% of my deck, hopefully I drew into the red Elemental Blast I have in there just for Cyclonic Rift. And I remember before Iona was banned, I had Scour from Existence in the deck to take care of Iona. And I could understand people saying, oh, like, I don't want to dedicate one slot in my deck for this one singular card. But at the same time, if it's just one card, how common can it be to face against if you have over 20,000 cards? So,
but there's going to be people that are running tutors, so it's not just one card in a 99.
But in that sense also, like, how salty would you be if you're playing in an environment where everybody has more or less the same power decks? And sorry for going off tangent, but we are talking about bannings, so it's more or less what I'm getting at with the silver bordered cards. Like, okay, if you're constantly tutoring and you're playing Cyclonic Rift and you're playing Iona and you're playing Flash, then you're obviously not playing 5 power decks or 6 power decks. You're up there like 7, 8, 9, 10. So hopefully everybody else in your table is playing that. So when you have the person, oh, okay, I'll cast Cyclonic Rift at the end of the turn before mine. Hopefully somebody has Pact of Negation, Force of Negation, Force of Will to deal with that. Now, if you're playing like a level 3, I have this, Ishkana Spider tribal deck, like, what are they going to do against an Overlord of Cyclonic Rift? So I understand the salt there, and with Iona. But let's say, for example, I feel like Slivdrazi Monstrosity is too broken, whatever, but I haven't tested it. That's what I like about you guys having the Discord. In fact, I got Discord just to be able to talk with you guys about the format, because I like this so much, and about
bringing people together. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, it's the same, likewise. And that's the thing, like, you guys are open to community suggestion, which is great. For example, a conversation I had for a longest time with Hamster was for Luke Mertens, one of the like special, cards that they made commemorative for him. And it's like, that's where you do have your lines that you're like, you don't know if you should cross or not, what to do with these cards. For example, another one was with the Unglued 2, I think it was. Like, some cards have been revealed, quote unquote, by Maro, but all he did was just, this is the art we were planning, and then here's the information, make what you want out of it. But in that case, it's still fun. Like, they did have poison lands. Like, I think one of them was like Dead Bunny's Isle or something like that. And then in the test cards, what do? They had the black-green one that poisons you when you tap it for mana. So it's like, they are recycling ideas. So if you walk on eggshells, like where's the line? Like, maybe we shouldn't include it because, they aren't real cards, they're just ideas, but then they go and in the test cards, they print one of them. Or let's not use like the magazine cards, and then in the test cards they print it. Exactly. That's what I meant earlier about let's lawyer it up. It has a precedence. I'm going to use that to my advantage, or something similar.
This is the problem and the crux of our love-hate relationship with Maro, because Maro is a wonderful guy. He creates all these weird, excellent cards, and
mechanics too.
Yes, but he's definitely not got that lawyer mindset, because the amount of contradictory FAQs we've had to sort through and sift through and weld together into a Frankensteinian monstrosity of rule text, it's been a little headache-inducing sometimes.
Yeah, that's why, for example, I don't know if you've noticed, but usually for these videos where I incorporate, silver bordered cards or the mystery booster test cards, before that, I had to do research. Not just research, let me brew this deck because I've played with it, or I've seen people play with it, or I like the mechanic and I know enough cards where I can, work through it, or go to Scryfall and, try and see what other cards have this mechanic. That kind of research was done also, but then I had to, let me go on Twitter, or let me go through Maro's blog and see, blog and see if anything's there. And if not, I don't even tweet to him. I tweet straight to either Eli Schifrin, who's one of the rules people, or I tweet Gavin Verhey, because he's also worked with the rules. So I don't try to bother Maro too much, because sometimes I do want a straight answer. And if the guy has, actually gone through the work typing up a FAQ, then I don't want to ask him questions on him like, oh, I already answered these, like don't ask me the same thing. But I do it for like gray areas. For example, I think one of them was for a visitor from Planet Q, where it's like an instant creature. And like, okay, can I imprint this with Isochron Scepter? You would think, yeah, that's a no-brainer. But knowing how these kinds of cards work, I wanted it straight from the horse's mouth. So I think I tweeted Eli Schifrin about that. He said, yeah, that works. So it's like, it's interesting that, when you use Isochron Scepter with that, what you're doing is you're creating tokens. You're not casting copies of spells, because when the creature as an instant resolves, it's a creature on the battlefield. And like, that's so interesting. Like, how would people want to be against playing these kinds of cards?
Technically, I believe that would create a token card, which would be slightly different from a normal token, actually. But yeah,
it wouldn't.
It's interesting.
It wouldn't. I don't think it would create a token card. Thus, creating token cards is a whole other thing that that we deliberately retemplated how token cards creation is worded to make sure that it's clear that it's not a creation effect, because the Gatherer of Rulings on the cards, which have token cards like the Assembling Skeleton, say that it isn't a creation effect and you shouldn't treat it as such, as usually the token cards aren't going to the battlefield, and that's what needs to happen for it to be treated as creation.
Yeah, it's very weird, isn't it? Though it's all these little tiny corner cases, like a token card versus a token. It's
Sure.
so confusing, and they honestly, that's the thing. If there was a bit more oversight and more, they actually had a proper team dedicated to it, I'm sure these would all be fixed. But obviously, these are just playtest cards. Yeah. It's our job to interpret.
Exactly. That's what I meant for you guys. Everything is technically a playtest card for this format, which is also fun because you're exploring new things. And because it's not a format, it's an add-on. As this matures with more people playing it and testing it, I think it'll be even more harmonious. You'll have also, opinions from other people. But for the playtest cards, what bummed me out about them is like I would have preferred, instead of them rushing something like that, had they actually worked on it and made it silver bordered, just include a silver bordered card in these mystery boosters. Like, why not? It's cube. Like, you can put anything in cube.
Put them in a Commander product, just so.
Exactly.
That's the place for weird mechanics, isn't it?
Technically, Unsanctioned is a Commander product, but again, I'm not getting into that conversation.
I did not know.
Yeah, it was promoted as such. I think when at first there was these products that were being promoted, and Gavin was on it. It was a video where they were promoting other products. They were promoting Unsanctioned, the mystery booster, and the game night, the new game night. They said, Gavin said that, this is for, we did this with Commander and Cube in mind. And I was a bit excited. And then, someone had to clear up, no, this doesn't mean that we're going to do silver bordered legal again like we did before. And then I was even more confused, and I'm like, then it's not for Commander. I'm like, okay, if it's for Cube, then maybe it's something draftable. But then as he kept talking, he said, no, you take these half decks and then you combine them to make a bigger deck so that you have variety. And I'm like, but that's not Cube either. Nobody's drafting this. And then I thought, maybe they're talking about Mystery Booster, which, yeah, you are drafting it. And then these cards are only legal for cubing. It's like the conspiracies. Conspiracies aren't legal anywhere unless you include them in your cube.
Yeah, it'd be quite fun to introduce conspiracies in some way, but it's just not really viable, is it? They don't have the sort of framework there.
No, and it's also inherently broken, yeah, because you can just add, X and Y conspiracies, and then you're at the beginning of the game, you just reveal, I revealed 20 conspiracies. And
notice how they didn't ban any of those cards for Commander though, because they just let that be self-policing in conspiracy, because a lot of the cards only function in draft format, really, but you can still technically include them in Commander, they just don't function.
Yeah, Paliano the High City, yeah, it's not banned, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't tap for mana. Like, unless
such pretty art, though. Such pretty art.
Yeah, at least I have it in my cube. So at least, like I mentioned earlier, all these cards, I can't use them anywhere. Whatever. Let's just put it in my trash cube, and, that's where it works, and that's where it'll function. But it's fun. Like, there's this card, I forget its name right now, but it's when you draft it, for every card you drafted before it gets a +1/+1 counter. So, and then the player who drafted it that round, they swiped it before I did, and it entered the game as a 15/15. And it was crazy because they also had Jared the Lich Lord in play, so they had this really interesting loop going, which I didn't expect to happen when I built the cube. Unfortunately, it got Swords to Plowshare, but that also opened my eyes to the fact that there are so many good cards. There should be a format for this, and that's where you guys chime in, because you guys do have this add-on. It's almost like an expansion. Like, for example, if you have a game like Five Tribes or any other board games where they have expansions that add a different dimension to the game, that's almost what you guys have. For example. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we're trying to go for here. Yeah, it's just it works. It works by itself. You don't need to agonize over any weird rules interactions. We've done all that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And most of it works relatively intuitively. That was the key: simplicity, intuition. Just
yep.
I think something that would be
just like to
go ahead. Sorry.
Say at this point that we're not kind of really seeking to offer the definitive silver-bordered experience with Uncommander. That if you want to do that, then just play the silver-bordered cards in your Commander and don't let anyone tell you what to do. Or if you like, you can just use the Rules Committee's ban list as guidelines. But we're kind of offering kind of like a different option, which is more kind of modular and is compatible with the main Commander format. The kind of thing which you could take to other play groups and it wouldn't be kind of too disruptive, that everyone knows what to expect.
Oh, definitely. And for example, those of you cubists out there who love including these in your cube, I know Commander Legends is going to come out and it might help, make more people be able to build a Commander cube. But for those who already have this Commander cube, I found that these cards have helped my play group really enjoy silver bordered cards. So at least that's one way that I was able to, introduce them to it for it to work. But I think something else that would be interesting and cool, as you guys, you do have your Discord server and you have these conversations with other people. I think it might be interesting to have some kind of meetup, like when you guys have more of a following and more, just ironing out a lot of the kinks, that at least, these online ways to play these games, whether it's X-Mage or Cockatrice, I think it might be interesting to have sort of not a tournament per se, obviously, because what Arena does, but I think it'd be interesting because that way more people would get involved. They don't have to really invest in the cards. It's just a way for, okay, so here's more or less the rules, here's the ban list, go nuts, and then let's see more or less how it would work. And I think that would be a good experience for people I'm interested, but I don't have anybody to play with, but at least in your Discord server, organizing games let's say this date at this time, obviously specifying the time zone. Whoever is up, okay, let's just try this out. Because I know you guys are on Discord quite often, but we haven't been able to sit down and play, oddly enough. It's more like semantics and theory crafting or whatever. But I think that's something
part of the problem with that is, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an American accent.
Yeah.
We're both in Britain, so but we can definitely get it to work out. But the timing is difficult at times. But I'd definitely be down for that. It's the main program that we use for playtesting online when we could do it. Actually, it's not very well known. Actually, it's called Lackey CCG. So if anyone wants to sort of take another look at that, that's another good alternative to Cockatrice. It's a lot less organized and regimented, which I think is advantageous for a weird format like this that does things you're not really supposed to do in normal Commander. Like in X-Mage, Cockatrice, for example, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not hugely familiar with it, but you wouldn't be able to, for example, shuffle one of your opponent's cards into your deck or take it into your hand.
Technically you can, but what the opponent would have to do is they would have to slide it into your playmat area, to put it that way, into your battlefield, and then from your battlefield you put it into your deck and you shuffle it, because every object doesn't have an owner. In fact, let's say for example I steal somebody's creature with Galena and then they rage quit, because I've had that happen before. If they leave the room, I still have their permanent, and that per the rules, if somebody leaves, but it doesn't disappear. But for example, okay, I know it's not supposed to disappear, so what I do? All right, I'll just put it in the exile zone. So there are some workarounds. Again, not sponsored by Cockatrice. Cockatrice is freeware, just like you guys. Lackey CCG. Not sponsored either. But there are ways for people to enjoy these cards. Without having to go through the work of, I have to find a play group, or I live in this place. Like you guys mentioned, Britain. I live in Puerto Rico, so it's not like.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, all the earthquakes, have made it incredibly difficult to work on the channel. Yeah, with power outages, loss of internet. But at least we do have at least where I live, I have some stability. Luckily, I didn't, lose my home like a lot of people did. But even then,
God forbid, a video.
Yeah, definitely. After we spend like over an hour talking, that would be quite the snafu. But as you mentioned it, like we do have a 4-hour difference, but we are able to at least communicate on Discord. And Commander games tend to be an hour or 2 hours long, but that's fine if we coordinate beforehand, which I think a lot of people could do. Yeah. Anyone interested? Also, in my Discord, if you want to hit me up for some cockatrice, as long as I have internet, and
we should link to each other's Discords.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put them up as we speak, and I'll also put it in the description of the video. But just to summarize, since it was something I was looking for, I had to go out and look for it, which is unfortunately how a lot of things work. But at the same time, it's rewarding. So I wanted to do this sort of collaboration, at least with this video, because we have collaborated before, like on rules and opinions. Like for example, Unglued 2, I sent you guys some images.
Yeah, we had no idea about those before you actually.
Yeah, and for the test cards also, like coincidentally, I think we began talking more or less when those spoilers were coming out, and we were throwing ideas back and forth as I was making the video. So, but at least in that sense, it is rewarding to discover something, but at the same time, if nobody tells me anything, like I wouldn't have found it. I found it because I was lucky, because I wanted an outlet for this, and I know I'm not the only one, because otherwise, the videos I have on these silver bordered commanders, they would have 0 views. So I do know that there are people who want it. So this month, all this interest and all this attention, I should say, to silver bordered cards is for that. People, if you are interested, you guys are going through a lot of work so that people don't have to do as much work, but at the same time, it is like a collaborative effort. You guys, aren't behind, an iron curtain or like the Wizard of Oz where, you can't interact with anybody. So no
iron coast that we're hiding behind. Don't worry.
Yeah. So there is like a sense of community, which is what Commander is all about, anyways. The being a community, and it would be ironic that we would have like C on EDH eventually with all these spiky silver bordered cards. So that'd be hilarious to see. Also, like people just spamming and abusing Slivdrazi monstrosity. Okay, now it's banned. Like we try to keep it yellow, but now it's banned.
The cards are so silly in names. I think you wouldn't be able to take yourself seriously in playing competitive, would you? I attack you with my metallic rooster for lethal.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what makes it fun also. So I do invite everyone who's able to to get on your Discord. Like I mentioned, even though we have like this time difference, you guys still are on there. And the good thing about Discord is like you can leave messages and people will eventually get to it. And it is a community. People can exactly. Banter back and forth. So I think it is good for people who are interested in silver bordered cards. You guys gave some good tips. One of which is just have your commander be silver bordered. And that's it. But work around the mechanics, and then slowly but surely add silver bordered cards. Like don't make the silver bordered card oops, I cast this silver bordered card unexpectedly.
Yeah, definitely warn people beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. But at least if you sit down at the table and say, oh, is this okay? Or and even then if people say, yeah, sure, like what else do you have silver bordered, you can maybe mention the cards that are in it, which people usually do anyways. Like for example, if I sit down on a table and I see some really competitive commanders, people usually say, oh, no, this isn't super competitive. This is, I don't know, like Bird Tribal. And it's, the Revi, which the Revi is, really busted commanders.
Degenerate, yes.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if it's Bird Tribal, fine, I don't have to whip out, Brago competitive or something like that,
But Kangi is right there, and he wants to be your Bird Tribal commander. I just don't understand why people pick the Revi.
Because Kangi, the Revi is more common, I guess, because he did come out in a commander product. But, that's the thing.
Makes better tokens, that's perfect.
Yeah, that's true. Well, to each their own, I guess. Tomato. But that's what I would like to eventually happen, because having played for so long, I don't want to sound pedantic, but a lot of things do tend to get stale very quickly, and unfortunately Wizards realizes that, and they're pumping out products month after month, and there is wallet fatigue, which is what's good. You guys mentioned Lackey, CCG, I did mention Cockatrice and X-Mage, so you don't have to really buy the cards. Like, hope I don't get arrested by WotC for saying so, or because I'm not pro proxy, like don't proxy Black Lotus, but if you want to proxy Luke Mertens, then I guess, because there's no other way to get it. But in that sense, like playing with the queue was refreshing, because I have these cards that I don't play with. I play with the heroes, the conspiracies, and sometimes just playing variant commander formats, like let's play Arch Enemy today, or let's play Plane Chase. But your add-on, like your expansion to the commander game, is good because it does give you something to do with the cards besides collecting dust in a box or in your closet. or in a binder. So for anybody out there who's interested, or maybe you're not interested, but maybe you know somebody who's interested who won't shut up about silver bordered cards and, you know, are like bothering you to play with them, you know, like just keep it simple, or, you know, go to the website and figure it out. You guys do have your philosophy, and that more or less explains the ban list, which I said, don't be alarmed at first, because when I saw the ban list at first, I was like, oh, wow, this is immense. But then when you align it with the philosophy, it makes sense.
So that's something we're working on at the moment, actually. We're subdividing the ban list page into different sections based on kind of why that particular card was banned. So we'll have a short description at the beginning of each of those sections, kind of explaining the philosophy for why that card, that sort of card, doesn't make the cut for Uncommander.
Yeah,
so hopefully
manageable chunks. Yeah.
So you don't have to cross-reference between the ban list and the philosophy.
Yeah, sure. And the same with erratas. For example, you guys do try and make things simpler, but at the same time, it's not ambiguous. Like if it's obvious what the card does, like you don't have to worry about like memorizing an errata or anything. So I don't want people to feel too discouraged or overwhelmed about all this information, because you guys do try and make it, you know, as user friendly as possible, as foolproof, just so that everyone's harmonious and on the same page and nobody's arguing. Oh, like when is it nighttime? Like or I'm taller. I can see the sunset before you do. Yeah, so you know, so you guys do, and that's the thing. Like obviously, you know, we share the same philosophy, because that's how I like to play silver bordered cards also. But you made a good point that you guys aren't policing silver bordered cards. Like if you want to play these cards, or you're arm wrestling, or you know you want to pick a fight, you know, so go for it. But at least for those who want to keep, exactly, for those.
Like a proper rule set. If you want to just actually play silver bordered just completely with all the wackiness and weird craziness and meta characteristics, that's fine. You can do that. It's but you don't need us to tell you how to do that. You can just do that.
Yeah.
So there's no point making rules for something that don't need rules.
Yeah, and again, if you want to take what we've done but then change something about it, like say you want to run Alexander Clamilton in your play group, you can say that all cards which refer to lines of text are legal, and that's all right.
Shot.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because that would be the way to play it. Otherwise, he would do nothing if you reveal a basic land without, you know, a line of text. It's just, oh, I'm sorry, he got +0, you die. But yeah, like I said, you're just trying to keep it grounded for those people who, you know, just want to expand their black bordered possibilities into more interesting mechanics that are viable, like the contraptions and things like that. Because I love playing with contraptions, and I would build a Brea deck with contraptions. But again, if someone says no, those cards are banned, I have to literally take out all the cards that assemble contraptions, besides just ignoring the contraptions deck. So, you know, it is
shame, isn't it?
And Brea with contraptions, let me tell you, that's pretty broken, because you
that sounds fun.
You have access to every contraption except for one. And then if you say, oh, tap, and like if you have the enchantment that becomes like the quote unquote legal Tolarian Academy, that's just ridiculous there. Because you tap it. And the same.
I'm not sure if we ban that one or not, because, like you said, Tolarian Academy is too strong. And then, I don't know.
But also, for example, the equipment that's black, where it says, "Oh, this creature gets a boost in power for every artifact you control," and if you have like 15 contraptions in play, then you know things can get really.
Yeah, there's cards that do that. I mean, what's the new enchantment from Eldraine that does that? Something
I think it's all that glitters or all that shimmers.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. All the glitters.
And you put that in Brea. Exactly. You put that in Brea, and you're already building contraptions. So
I'm sure that's horrendous. Yeah.
Yeah, but from for example, for myself, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a spiky player, or I need to win, otherwise I'm not having fun. Yeah, exactly. Because
I'm like messing around with mechanics and pushing them as far as you can go, right?
Exactly. So, for example, you see that in my surgeon commander video is like, okay, how can I quote unquote break this without going spiky? And it's like, all right, let's just make it enchantress. But then when I was testing it, I was like, hot damn, like I'm drawing crazy amount of cards, but I'm not necessarily playing anything inherently broken. So it does open.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, auras suck. Auras suck in Commander. So a card that makes them good is fun and interesting.
It's like
the bad cards viable again.
It's like Feather, which is why Feather is so popular. Like Feather literally shines turds, just like Zada does.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it finally viable to include all these weird cards. I mean, like, obviously, I'm not going to include them because that would be abusing my power as an arbiter of this. But I make a lot of custom cards, a lot of custom commanders specifically. But yeah, obviously, the fun part is making like cards that enable like whole other suites of interesting things, like Feather, like
exactly.
Search in general. Yes.
And they are popular for a reason, because that's what a lot of people said. Like, I'm tired of just combat-based Boros cards. And then Wizards made a slam dunk with Feather, and then Theros comes along, and what do you have?
You have the new Optimus, just saying.
Yeah, exactly. So, and which is interesting because Optimus Prime is another cool Boros commander, but it's not legal. And then you have like the Achilles, type of card for Theros, which is interesting also in that it gets protection. So they are trying to at least learn from their, from what they continue to do.
It's still just a combat card, though. It doesn't do anything.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at. Like, they're experimenting, but they're still keeping it too tame, like too loyal to the color pie. And I can guess.
I mean, at least we still have Brian style time, so you can just yeet things at your opponent until they die.
Exactly. So I can get the keeping it faithful to the color pie, but that also like it inhibits creativity. Like, at least with Feather, it's not combat based, but obviously what are the red and white spells you're targeting her with? Oh, she gets +1/+0 first strike, you draw a card. Or oh, she gets +3/+1, oh, and you scry one. So there are ways to abuse it, but at the end of the day, you're pumping her up to smash face with it. But it is a different dimension to that Voltron strategy, which is what people like about her.
And they've managed to diversify mono-red commanders recently, so it's not like they can't do the same with Boros.
Exactly, like Feldon. Feldon is literally mono-red Reanimator. Who would have thought we would get a mono-red?
Turns it into a token deck, which is fun.
Exactly.
A new one, of course.
So
there's loads of different weird red cards.
Exactly.
And then there's Kiki Jiki, of course.
Oh no, we don't talk about Kiki.
But interesting enough, thanks to silver bordered cards, you can actually make more infinite Kiki Jiki engines, because you have white red with the angel that blinks. The name just slipped my mind. Restoration Angel, and then you can also make it infinite with red blue with I think it's the sprite, like the fairy that when it enters the battlefield it untaps a creature.
Yeah, the modern combo before they banned it. What was that thing? Flitter sprite or something?
Yeah, I'll put the image when I remember it for the video. But then
we'll be right in post.
Yeah, but then in silver bordered cards, you can now have a red green infinite combo with Kiki Jiki, because there is a silver bordered card that when it enters the battlefield, I think it's Eager Beaver. I'm not sure, but there is one. Eager Beaver. When Eager Beaver enters the battlefield, you untap target permanent. So thanks to your format. Oh, I don't want to brew white. Red Kiki Jiki or white or blue red Kiki Jiki. I can make red green Kiki Jiki or non-black Kiki Jiki, and then have this beaver also, which makes the combo even more accessible. So that's what's interesting. Like, it does open the doors up also for other Melvins and even Spikes too to do that.
Yeah, in other weird, interesting things. And obviously the Timmies just enjoy playing massive things. I mean, if anyone's a Timmy player out there, likes big monsters, look up Godzilla in the unorthodox format. That thing is massive.
That's crazy. And even then, like, for example, Grusilda, what's fun about Grusilda is finally getting both halves of big fairy monster in the graveyard, and then you reanimate it, because she melds it together, and now you actually have a 99/99 on the battlefield, and it has like ultra menace, I think, because it has to be blocked by 3 or more creatures. So
he's a thick boy.
Yeah, so it does open the doors for a lot of possibilities. Yep. We
have given errata to the big furry monster, so that it does kind of work rules-wise to cast both halves from your hand.
Oh, that was a nightmare.
But getting both of those in your hand to start with in a singleton deck is hard enough.
Yeah, and making that thing work, rule as written, was a pain as well.
Oh, yeah. Say that again.
Well, that's the prize. Oh, now I have a 99/99 for my efforts. Well, so at least we just to summarize a bit, this is like in no way, shape, or form like an authoritative way to play silver bordered cards. It's just like more of a grounded way, because you guys have a philosophy where we want to try and make it as black bordered as possible. You guys do include like a great library of cards, to put it that way, like a database also, where if you want to see these cards, you can, because a lot of the cards you have you can't find in Scryfall, right, for obvious reasons. And you do have
a lot of them we found was on magiclibrarities.net.
Yeah.
And if anyone has any other potential cards to include in the format, please do come over to Discord and just throw them at us like Kirby did, because we just love more stuff. It's never a bad thing to have more cards in the format unless they're broken, but then we ban them, so it's fine.
So
all you're doing is improving everything.
Exactly. so there are a lot of pros to have it all in the same place. Like even if someone is just curious and they, like you mentioned, you guys have a lot of information from Magic Libraries, but also people who know maybe lots of things that you guys didn't know or that I didn't know is useful to do. So there's also a lot of community input, a lot of output that you guys have. So I do recommend this, which is why I took the time, to contact you guys and try and have this this sort of podcast type episode.
Man.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm grateful that you guys were able to get on, because I know we do have like the time difference, and like hopefully we can probably get some games in and with other fans of the channel or fans with your website, because you do have other people in Discord also. Like maybe someday we can like coincide on which platform to use in order to play the games, to actually sit down. I think that would be interesting. Also,
4-man pods going. Yeah,
exactly.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be totally interesting. Well, again, thanks for coming over to the tavern, so to speak. Right, I don't have the budget yet, to fly you over and keep you like in a motel for a couple of days.
Oh man, Puerto Rico sounds great. But tell me when you get famous, we'll be back.
Yeah, of course, like definitely, like sandy beaches and palm trees. I doubt you guys wouldn't mind that one bit.
Nothing says peak nerd like playing Commander on the beach.
Yeah, all the cars just flying over in the sand. At least if you do that, then Pikachu will be doing sand attack. So that would be interesting for the unorthodox supplement as well. All right. So, like, if there's any other information you guys want to throw out there for people to make it easier to find you, follow you, and anywhere.
No, I don't really think so. Apart from obviously the links, but you'll be putting all those in the description, all that, won't we? I don't know my Discord handle right off the top of my head. I'm afraid I can probably find it, but just a long list. Spew out a long list of letters.
At least that's what post production is for. At least.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thanks you guys for visiting. Thanks for having you over. Anything else you guys want to say? And if not, we can sign off and let the people finally go access your website.
Ban Cyclonic Rift.
you gotta wear the shirt like the salt is real.
Yes, it is. I used to play token decks.
Yeah, I imagine not anymore thanks to Cyclonic Rift.
No.
All right, guys. Well,
yes,
thanks.
That's why we get Teferi's protection. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much for having us, and it's been really wonderful.
Yeah,
both
likewise.
to kind of have feedback from you, and also just to have this opportunity to kind of cross-pollinate and get the word out there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. All right, talk to you guys later.
Been a pleasure.
All right, likewise. Bye.
Yes.
To all the viewers who stayed on until the end, how do you feel about silver-bordered cards in Commander? I encourage everyone watching to leave comments down below. Any well-thought-out comments are welcome. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout-out to all my higher-tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Barkeep Upkeep on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and thanks for listening.